I called my children to tell them I was about to go bankrupt. They did not know that I was holding a winning lottery ticket in my hand. My name is Hélène. I live alone in the old seaside villa my husband, Louis, left behind. The house is too large for an old woman. The walls have started to show damp patches, and many rooms have long been abandoned, covered in a fine layer of dust from the passage of time. My only companions are the old radio on the kitchen table and the family photo frames on the mantelpiece. Every day of mine passes exactly the same. In the morning, I brew a pot of Earl Grey tea, turn on the radio to listen to the weather forecast, and then take my tea out to the porch to watch the sea. In the afternoon, I walk to the small market in the village, buying just enough food for one person. And in the evening, I often sit alone in the vast living room, gazing at Louis's portrait in silence. My children, they have their own lives. Mark, my son, occasionally calls from Paris. His calls are always rushed, his voice tinged with annoyance, as if I were interrupting an important meeting. Sophie, my daughter, usually sends short texts. "How are you, Mom?" she asks. But before I can even reply, she has already moved on to complaining about her children and money. I have grown accustomed to this silence, but deep down, I still hold on to a fragile hope that one day they will truly come to visit, not out of obligation, but because they miss me. To hold on to the illusion of a family that has fallen apart, I have a secret habit. Every week, I buy a lottery ticket. The numbers never change. Louis's birthday, mine, and those of our 2 children. To me, it is not a game of chance. It is the only way I can arrange the numbers that once meant the world to me together on a single piece of paper. The next morning, it was drizzling. The sea wind blew strongly through the old window frames, sending the papers on my kitchen table flying. As I bent down to pick them up, my hand brushed against an old hospital bill, a cold reminder of Louis's final days, of my solitude in the hospital. My heart ached. To chase away the sadness, I picked up the lottery ticket I had bought the day before. It was just a meaningless habit to fill the void. I spread it out on the table, next to the local newspaper. The first number matched. 12. Louis's birthday. I smiled faintly at the random coincidence. The second number, 25. Mark's birthday. It matched too. My heart started to beat a little faster. Then the third. The fourth. The entire sequence. I held my breath, checking each number again and again. I turned on the old radio, cranked up the volume, and waited for the lottery program to replay the results. The announcer's voice read out each number, loud and clear. A match. They all matched. The teacup in my hand trembled violently and then fell onto the table, shattering, hot tea spilling everywhere. But I felt nothing. My whole body was shaking. I could not believe it. I looked at the ticket again, then back at the newspaper. There was no doubt. I had won the jackpot, an amount of money that could change everything. And then I burst into tears. Not tears of joy, but tears of fear. My body trembled, not from excitement, but from a loneliness that suddenly felt more vivid than ever. I had a fortune in my hands, but I had no one to share it with. Memories flooded back, clear and bitter. I remembered the night Louis had a severe heart attack. I had frantically called Mark, my voice breaking. But on the other end of the line he had snapped, "Why are you calling at this hour?" "I'm in a meeting," before hanging up. His career was more important than his father's life. That pain, that disregard, still stung. I remembered the day after the funeral when Sophie visited. She cried, her shoulders shaking as she hugged me. I thought that at least I still had my compassionate daughter. But when I worriedly mentioned the remaining expenses, her expression immediately changed. "Things are tough for me too, Mom," she said, then quickly changed the subject. It seemed her love also had a price, and I could not afford it. I recalled the incident with old Mr. Martin's house at the end of the village. After he passed away, His two sons took each other to court to fight over the house, severing their brotherly bond. I used to think my family would never be like that. But now, I was no longer sure. I pictured the scene of Mark and Sophie returning, not out of concern for me, but with fake smiles and sweet words to fight over this money. The fear of a charade of false affection, of an ugly squabble, choked all my joy, turning the lottery ticket into a curse. I stood up hastily. I went to the old bookshelf, took out the oak box where I once kept Louis's first love letters. I carefully placed the lottery ticket inside, among the faded words of love. Then I hid the box in a drawer behind my husband's portrait on the mantelpiece. I touched the photo and whispered, "Only you know, Louis." That night, I could not sleep. The lottery ticket lay silent in the wooden box, but its existence had stirred my entire world. I sat alone in the darkness of the living room, thinking about two words: family. I was not just thinking about Mark and Sophie. I thought about everyone else. I remembered, in my desperation after my children's rejections, I had called my younger brother, Thomas. "I need help, Thomas," I cried into the phone. But he just responded in a cold, practical manner. "Sell the piece of land behind the garden. You will get money right away. Why are you holding on to it so tightly?" He did not see my pain. He only saw a transaction. And then I thought of Mrs. Marie, the widowed neighbor who lived in the small house at the end of the street. A few days after Louis's funeral, she had come to visit. She did not offer many empty words of comfort. She just sat silently beside me. As she was leaving, she pressed a small envelope into my hand. Inside was her entire meager pension. "Take this for now. Do not be shy," she said. "We have to lean on each other in hard times." I sat there, in the dark, and the contrast between those two actions was stark. On one side, my own flesh and blood, who saw my pain as a business opportunity. On the other, a stranger, willing to give away everything she had. Blood ties or human kindness, which was truly stronger. A bold, almost insane idea began to form in my mind. This lottery ticket had given me a chance, not to get rich, but to find the truth. I would not tell anyone about it. Instead, I would stage a play of my own. I would pretend to be bankrupt. I would pretend to be in debt, on the verge of having the bank foreclose on this house. I would test each one of them. I wanted to know, when I truly had nothing left, when I was just a burden, who would extend a hand and who would turn their back. After careful preparation, I began my performance. I picked up the phone, my hand deliberately trembling, and called Sophie first. "Sophie," I said, my voice filled with panic. "The house. The bank is about to. They are going to foreclose, dear. I do not know what to do." There was a long silence on the other end. I did not hear concern. I only heard a long, heavy, tired sigh. "Mom," she said, "times are tough for everyone. My husband, Paul, just lost his job." She paused, then continued, "Maybe you should sell the house and move into a nursing home to ease the burden." A nursing home. Every word was like a shard of broken glass cutting into my heart. She did not ask how much I owed. She did not ask what help I needed. She just wanted to push me away, to push this burden onto someone else. I will think about it," I whispered before hanging up, tears streaming down my face in silence. I took a deep breath, wiped my tears, and called Mark. I told him the same story, but his reaction was not sympathy. It was irritation. "How did you spend so much that you are drowning in debt?" he snapped. "I have told you so many times about managing your finances. I am very busy right now." "All right, fine, let me look into it." Look into it. I knew exactly what that meant. It was the same way he said, "I will try to come by tomorrow morning," the night his father died. It was just an empty promise to end the call. In his eyes, I was not a grieving mother, but simply a bad investment. Finally, It was my brother, Thomas. When he heard the news, he was not surprised at all. On the contrary, I heard a faint chuckle. "Oh, is that so? If you are in such a tight spot, let me help you." His voice was full of false generosity. "I will buy the villa. I will give you half the market price, as a way to help you pay off your debt." My heart bled. Even my own brother saw my pain as an opportunity to profit. And when I tried calling his wife, my sister-in-law, she did not even bother to hide her disdain. "Oh dear, you are old and still getting into debt," she said with a dry laugh. "Old people are such a nuisance." I clutched the receiver, my hand trembling with anger and disappointment. I hung up. My play had its first audience, and their reactions were more cruel than I could have ever imagined. My heart, already scarred, now bore fresh wounds. After those calls, I almost fell apart. I sat alone in the living room, feeling colder and more alone than ever. But then, I remembered Mrs. Marie. I decided to conduct one final test. I walked to her small house at the end of the street. Mrs. Marie was in her garden, diligently tending to her vegetable patches. Seeing me, she smiled kindly. "Hello, Hélène. You do not look well." I sat down on the old wooden bench on her porch. I did not have to act much. The disappointment was written all over my face. I told her my fabricated story, about the debts, about the risk of losing my home. Mrs. Marie listened without a single interruption. When I finished, the smile on her lips had vanished. Her face turned pale with worry. She did not offer empty platitudes. She just silently stood up, gently patted my hand, and hurried inside. A moment later, she returned, holding a small old wooden box. She opened the lid. Inside was a wad of crumpled euros and a few loose coins. "Here," she said, pressing the entire box into my hands, her voice firm. "This is all the savings I have. It is not much, but please take it. Keeping a roof over your head is the most important thing." I looked at the box, then up at her, this poor widowed woman, who was willing to give away everything she had. I could not hold back any more. The tears started to fall, but this time they were not tears of pain or disappointment. They were tears of profound gratitude. I was choked with emotion, unable to speak, and in that moment I understood something. Family is not always made of blood. Sometimes it is made of a loaf of warm bread, a small envelope, a kind heart willing to share. In my heart, Mrs. Marie was the one who truly deserved to be called family. That night, I did not sleep. The storm outside seemed to have subsided, leaving only the sound of the sea wind whistling through the cracks and the steady rhythm of the waves. I sat alone in the library, under the dim yellow light of the old desk lamp. I opened my journal, an old leather-bound notebook. But tonight, I was not recording stray thoughts. I was recording the truth. My hand trembled as I wrote the first line, next to Sophie's name. Each word felt like a cut to my own heart. My daughter wants to put me in a nursing home. She sees me as a burden to be offloaded. Next was Mark. My son looks down on me, blames me for my weakness. In his eyes, I am just a failed investment. Then came Thomas. My brother sees my pain as an opportunity. He is willing to buy his own sister's house on the cheap. And finally, I wrote about Mrs. Marie, my handwriting softening. A neighbor, a stranger, gave away everything she had. I reread those words. The pain was still there, aching, but mixed in with it was a cold, stark clarity. My play was over, and it had shown me everyone's true face. The people I had given birth to, raised, those who shared my blood, they no longer considered me family. The next morning I made my decision. Without a moment of hesitation, I drove into town to the small office of Mr. Martin, the old lawyer who had handled my family's affairs for years. I sat across from him, in the cold room filled with stacks of files. I did not tell him about my play. I simply stated my request directly. "Mr. Martin," I said, my voice calm, "I want to rewrite my will." He seemed surprised, but asked no further questions. He took out the necessary papers. Under his guidance, a new will was drafted. I read over every line. It was clear and irrevocable. My entire estate, this villa, my savings and the massive lottery winnings lying dormant in the wooden box would all be left to a single person, Mrs. Marie Dubois, my neighbour. My blood relatives, Mark, Sophie, Thomas, would not receive a single cent. I picked up the pen, and with a hand that no longer trembled, I signed my name at the bottom of the page. When I set the pen down, I let out a long breath, a breath I felt like I had been holding for years. I felt strangely light, as if a great weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The play was over. The decision was made. Now it was time to prepare for the coming storm. A few days later, I sent out short messages. "Come to the house on Saturday evening," I wrote. "I, divided by your sister, need to discuss the future of the villa." The two words "the villa" were the perfect bait, and they took it. On Saturday evening, they were all there. Mark in a neat shirt, a look of impatience on his face. Sophie, feigning concern, kept asking about my health, but her eyes darted restlessly from one antique to another. And Thomas arrived enthusiastically, carrying a leather briefcase. I invited them to sit around the dining table in the living room. The air was thick with calculation. My heart grew cold. Was this my family? A pack of vultures waiting. Mark was the first to speak. "Mom," he said, "why do you not just sign it over to me? I will take good care of it for our family." "For the family? Or for yourself?" I thought. Before I could answer, Sophie burst into tears. "No, brother. Mom, sell the house and come live with me and my husband. I will take care of you." "Take care of me? Or supervise what is left of my assets?" "Nonsense," Thomas snapped, placing his leather briefcase on the table. "Here," he pulled out a pre-drafted contract. "I already told you. I will buy it at the most reasonable price." They began to argue, each with their own reasons, but all centered on a single goal: how to get their hands on this house. I just sat in silence at the head of the table, observing. I looked at my pragmatic son, my hypocritical daughter, and my greedy brother. The pain inside me was gone. It had turned into disgust, a disgust for my own blood. Their performance was nearing its end. "This house should be mine," Mark growled. "No, Mom is coming to live with me," Sophie wailed. "Both of you, shut up. The contract is right here." Thomas slammed his hand on the table. As their argument reached its peak, I slowly stood up. A sudden silence fell over the room. All eyes turned to me, waiting for a verdict, waiting to see who I would choose, to whom I would award this prize. I looked at each of their faces. Mark's impatient face, Sophie's face, streaked with fake tears, Thomas's greedy face. I no longer saw my children, my brother. I only saw strangers. "You people," I began, my voice no longer trembling but firm and cold. "You thought I was poor. You saw me as a burden to be dealt with." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. "But the truth is," I said, "I have won the lottery. A huge fortune. Enough money for you to live in luxury for the rest of your lives." The atmosphere in the room froze. The arguing stopped abruptly. The three of them sat there, stunned, mouths agape, eyes wide with disbelief. Their play had ended. And now, another, far worse one, was about to begin. After a few seconds of stunned silence, Mark was the first to react. His impatient look vanished, replaced by a forced, remorseful smile. Mom, he said, his voice suddenly gentle. We were just worried about you. We did not mean anything else." Sophie burst into tears, this time seemingly genuine. "Mom, forgive me. I was wrong. I was just so desperate that I was not thinking straight. Thomas stammered, trying to snatch the contract off the table. Sister, sister, are you joking? Congratulations. That is wonderful news. Their act was pathetic. I looked at them, devoid of emotion. It is too late, I said, my voice like ice. I went to the cabinet drawer and took out a carefully sealed set of documents. The new will. I held it up for all of them to see. My entire estate, I declared. This villa and the lottery winnings will be left to the only person who offered me a hand when I was at my lowest. I paused, looking at their faces, which were now pale with fear. It will all go to Mrs. Marie. The room seemed to collapse. The neighbour? Sophie screamed, her tears gone. You are insane. You cannot do that. That is right. That is family property. Mark roared, reverting to his true self. They started shouting, arguing, blaming each other. But it was all futile. The decision had been made. The game was over, and they had lost. I did not say another word. I left their shouting, their arguments, and their false pleas behind me. I turned and slowly walked out onto the porch. The glass door closed, separating me from the chaos inside. The night sea was raging, waves with white crests crashing against the rocky shore. The wind whipped at my face, running through my grey hair. The salty smell of the ocean filled the air. I stood there and took a deep breath. For the first time in years, I felt like I could truly breathe. My heart felt light, strangely peaceful. I closed my eyes gently, listening to the waves. Blood does not make a family, I whispered to myself, and to Louis's spirit. Kindness is the only true inheritance. I had lost my children, lost my brother, but I had found myself again. I had found my freedom. And behind me, in that villa, was the silence and despair of those who had thrown away their most precious inheritance with their own hands. I opened my eyes and looked toward the distant horizon, where the sea met the starry night sky. My figure was small and frail against the majesty of nature, but within me was a calm as steady as the coastal cliffs. Behind me, the lights in the villa went out. The house was now plunged into a heavy silence, a silence not of peace, but of collapse. I knew that inside, the greedy were sitting in the dark, gnawing on their own despair and belated regrets. But I no longer cared. I turned my back on it all. I walked down the stone steps, toward the beach, where the sound of the waves continued its endless caress. I was free. A few months later, spring arrived. The sea was calmer, and wildflowers began to bloom along the coastal path. My villa was no longer silent. Mrs. Marie, my neighbour, did not accept the entire fortune for herself. I do not need that much, Hélène, she said. Kindness is not for sale. Instead, we went to the lawyer's office together. According to my final revised will, the majority of the lottery winnings were used to establish a charitable foundation named Louis and Hélène, dedicated to helping the lonely, elderly and families in need in our region. Mrs. Marie moved in with me at the villa. She was not a maid, nor a tenant. She was family. Every morning we drank tea together and went for walks. The house was now filled with warm laughter and conversation. Occasionally, her grandchildren would visit, bringing with them the noise and vitality of youth. As for my children and my brother, they tried to contest the will, but to no avail. My decision was perfectly legal. After that failure, they vanished from my life. Mark and Sophie divorced, blaming each other for losing the fortune. Thomas sold his house to pay off his debts. They had learned the bitterest of lessons. One afternoon, Mrs. Marie and I were sitting on the porch, watching her grandchildren play on the lawn. "Do you ever have any regrets, Hélène?" she asked me. I looked out at the sea and smiled. "No, Marie, I have no regrets. I lost a family made of blood, but I found a family made of heart. And that is the most precious inheritance of all. Use arrow up and arrow down to select a turn. Enter to jump to it. and escape to return to the chat.